Changemaker David Farrell from University College Dublin is a political scientist whose early research on electoral systems was strategic in helping bring the 2015 referendum on same-sex marriage to the Irish people. The marriage equality referendum was a pivotal event for many reasons. Not only was Ireland the first country to pass a referendum on the issue of same-sex marriage, it was also the first time in the world that a citizens' assembly had resulted in a successful referendum.
Freedom and tolerance, liberty, fraternity, equality.
David Farrell's research on the area of deliberative democracy proved instrumental in helping bring about the same-sex marriage referendum and the subsequent creation of a citizens' assembly to debate such issues.
Votes in favour of the proposal, 1,201,607.
I felt quite an extraordinary emotion. I mean, just to think that Ireland was the first country in the world to vote for marriage equality, and that we'd come down this road to that moment in 2015 when the guts of 2/3 of Irish citizens said, yeah, we should have that in this country.
In 2009, Ireland was in political and economic turmoil when David returned to Ireland from the UK. David, along with other political scientists such as Jane Souter, began to talk of change.
It was the middle of the crash. We saw that once again Ireland was going down the tubes, and we were thinking it's because they listen to too few people. There aren't enough voices there. They don't listen to the people, they listen to the same vested interests and bankers. So we set up a blog called Political Reform, and we started trying to agitate for change.
It was awful. There was a lot of anger in the streets, a lot of very angry citizens, quite reasonably. People were losing their jobs, the pay was being cut in the public sector. It was about as bad as you could imagine, really.
4 days after the IMF arrived in Ireland, Taoiseach Brian Cowan has finally told us why they're here. Tomorrow, November 22nd, the government will begin formal negotiations for an international rescue package for the Republic. Tonight, there have been angry scenes outside government buildings as a small number of protesters attempted to block official cars leaving after this evening's cabinet meeting. They shouted shame. Gardaí cleared the roadway.
I think it was actually because the IMF and the Troika were in here. So when the government was looking at what they could do, they couldn't do anything, It was Chopra who was calling all the shots. They needed to do something different, and they needed to show people that they would actually listen to the people. So I think that was really the crucial thing.
And we began to get a sense that some were particularly receptive, were Enda Kenny and Damon Gilmore, the Taoiseach and Taoiseach at the time. They could see this. They could see that this was something that would be worth trying. And they were, in fairness, already talking about setting up a convention on the Constitution. What we, I think, managed to do was to bring deliberation into the process.
Central Statistics Office with me here today.
The historic first sitting of the Constitutional Convention happened in 2012.
66 citizens chosen randomly from the electoral register make up some of this 100-member panel of the Constitutional Convention. They're joined by independent chairman Tom Arnold and 33 politicians, 4 of them from the Northern Ireland Assembly.
So some very senior politicians were members of that. Some of them would have been sceptical before they came in and would have wondered, will people really commit? Would they really listen? And having sat with the citizens for a number of weekends, they realised the commitment.
This was very high profile, the decision of the Constitutional Convention. There was a huge overflow of people who wanted to be in the room to witness this. So the cheers when the vote came out, that it was an overwhelming majority of the convention members saying, yes, let's have this referendum. It just got so much attention, it was impossible, I think, for the politicians to ignore it.
1,607.
The big thing that the convention contributed to the result on the marriage equality vote was the calling of the vote in the first place, because I'm sure it wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have happened for a long time more. But we also know from research that we did we carried out survey work on voters on polling day, all of the usual indicators you'd expect behind the yes vote. But we could see that separate from all of that, it was knowledge of the role of the Constitutional Convention which influenced that vote.
Elaine Cahalan from Cork and Jenny Sinnott from Boston in the United States married in the wake of the marriage referendum. For the couple, the yes vote had truly life-changing consequences.
Well, I guess throughout our relationship, we always knew we were going to get married. Whether that was here or somewhere else, but that was always part of our plan. But after the referendum, I guess for us it was the natural course. It was a very joyous time. It was a very nice and, I suppose, accepting time. There was a mindset, there was a culture change in Ireland that we felt, that we were no longer, tolerated. We were embraced and celebrated, and that was a very important mindset shift.
The news of the marriage referendum result reverberated beyond these shores.
I got calls from every corner in the States. Every one of my family members reached out because it was on the news everywhere. It made the news all over the world. So it gave me a real sense of Ireland being home now and a real pride in being Irish and living in this country that took such a decisive and bold, when you look at it, step, because it was this massive decision left in the hands of the citizens, and being the first country to do that, I think, was a bold stroke.
After the referendum on same-sex marriage, success followed in referendums on issues relating to abortion and blasphemy. Attention then turned towards gender equality.
We have a clause in the Constitution about a woman's place being in the home, as it's colloquially known. So the first Constitutional Convention recommended, having a referendum to take that out, but there was division over whether to replace it with carers or just take it out. That wasn't solved. So that's why in 2018, 2019, a new one was proposed to look at the whole area of gender equality. Now, having a referendum to take the women's place in the home clause out, having a referendum to widen the definition of family, so families wouldn't have to just be based on marriage. Other types of family could be recognised by the Constitution.
The Citizens' Assembly on Gender Equality started meeting in 2020 with a raft of issues to debate and vote on.
To each and every one of you, to the opening of the Citizens' Assembly on Gender Equality, as you've just heard.
Grace Hickey was one of the 99 members who would contribute to those discussions.
I heard of this Citizens' Assembly after the marriage equality referendum. I have very little interest in politics, to be honest with you. I was apprehensive because I wasn't too sure how I was going to be able to cope with facts and figures and graphs and all that sort of thing. And that frightened the hell out of me. So I said, if I can't cope, I'll just say, sorry, I can't cope.
Grace and the other Assembly members decided on 45 recommendations that are currently with a special Oireachtas committee that is headed up by TD Ivana Bacik. In the near future, Ireland could be called upon to vote once again on more issues that will create change.
And when you actually got people up and you heard their stories, I think that's what really mattered, There were kids who got up and talked about, their two mums and how they were really concerned that, if one of the mums got sick, they mightn't be allowed into the hospital as a next of kin, this kind of thing. And I think that's what mattered to the people in the room as well.
Do they take responsibility?
The experts were fabulous. I mean, there were some excellent speakers. There were some very difficult, hard subjects, to assimilate. But I think might have been helped by kind of the social aspect and talking to other people about their experience. I was doing it for the next generation. I was doing it for the women of Ireland, but also the men, because I do think I want my granddaughters and my grandsons to be aware that there should be very little, if any, difference between gender. Yeah, everybody should be able to do what they want to do in life and not be put aside.
My colleagues and I had no idea back in 2010 what kind of journey we were going to go down. We were promoting this idea. We were lucky to get the funding to promote this idea of a Citizens' Assembly. But I think in my wildest dreams, I never would have thought it would have come quite so far. There have been politicians who've embraced this role of a Citizens' Assembly and are using it repeatedly now to discuss really difficult things.
Marriage equality was an amazing step in equality for the LGBTQ plus community in Ireland. But it's an unfinished story. Fortunately, our family is not recognised as equal to other families. So at the moment, Kate has a legal connection to me because I carried her and gave birth to her, but she has no pathway to form a legal parent-child relationship with Jenny, her mother. We are fighting for that right. The people who set up the Constitutional Convention, the Citizens' Assembly, every single person who voted, you have changed our lives forever and the lives of all those around us. So I hope it was worth the effort. It certainly was for us.